If the best conversations happen over food, even better ones occur in the kitchen while dishes are being made. It's these moments of nattering quips and laughter that have alchemy and momentum. I find it's the conversation that flows as you stir a ragu or dice an onion that can bring a true sense of resolution. This episode of Confect Corner takes aim at the stories and emotion found in kitchens. We'll talk to Sandra Knecht, an artist who hosts collaborative meals that create a space to shift perspectives and build understanding. Using food, her art challenges how we think about identity, taste, history, and home. We'll take a trip around the Mediterranean with writer Anastasia Miari, whose new book records the recipes of grandmothers in the region. It's an insight into the joy, love, and passion that goes into everyday dishes. It's about longevity and the biographies of remarkable ladies as they reflect on life, love, hopes, dreams, and sources. And finally, leaving the kitchen behind, we'll journey to Versailles in France to discover the verdant and fragrant world of Perfumer Francis Kurkdjian. It's a sensorial dive into the inspiration of the eminent nose, whose passion for plants has driven his career. It's an evocation of history and a window into the future of his eponymous house. This is Confect Corner, and I'm your host, Sophie Grove.
I asked myself which artists, female artists, would be at my dinner party, the ones that influenced my world, and how do their works taste to me? And as a result of that, I developed these flavor profiles, and from there, the recipes.
It was really interesting. These stories come out again and again from these women, you know. It's either what they are really happy to have achieved by the time they're 80, 90 years old, or otherwise it's the regrets that they have about the life that they led, which I think has a lot to teach us about how to live our own lives.
Versailles is about that unexpectedness, something that you won't expect. And it's true that you won't expect such a little garden far away from what we all know about Versailles, which is the very, very, very symmetrical garden, very well taken care of.
Welcome to Confect Corner. I'm your host, Sophie Grove, here in London. And we're back together for this episode, so I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio by Gillian Tobias and also by our style director, Marcella Palik in Zurich. Hello to you both.
Hello, it's so nice to be back in conversation with you two.
Back from your travels, and Marcella, great to have you in the studio in Zurich.
Yeah, hello from wet Zurich, wet and cold Zurich.
Oh dear. Yeah. Well, as listeners will know, we like to start the episode with a little show and tell. Gillian, let's begin with you this month. What do you have for us?
Ooh, well, I am taking you across the Atlantic for a little wine tasting. I am, of course, Canadian, but I don't spend much time in Canada. And it was such a discovery to go to the Canadian wine region. I've always been a bit of a snob, I hate to say, about Canadian wines. And a dear, dear friend has moved back, so I had the opportunity to visit it. And first of all, the terroir is stunning. It's sort of, if you imagine, it's west of Vancouver and east of Calgary. And it is like Tuscany meets Lake Como. You have the lakes, but then you have the wonderful patterns that vineyards make on hilltops. So stunning setting. But the interesting thing about the Okanagan wine region is there are lots of small boutique wineries. It's not like vast chateau wineries. It's lots of very, very entrepreneurial, very, very passionate owners of vineyards who do almost like, I'd call it almost small batch wine. And as it has become the norm with the Napa Valley and new wineries coming up in Europe, architecture is also very sort of important to sort of create their identity. I'm going to hone in on one particular one, the Red Barn at Jagged Rock, which was a red barn, an agriculture barn in a vineyard, has been reimagined by the wonderful, wonderful Seattle-based architects Olsen Kundig. What's interesting about it is it has a contemporary aesthetic that kind of reflects the rule-breaking of the vineyard. They have these sort of steel tanks that are iridescent purple and blue. They ferment their wine in concrete. pots, these egg-shaped concrete pots. But there's glass and there's wood and there's red. But really at the heart of this is a wonderful, wonderful young female winemaker. She's called Kaylee Barr. She comes from the region, trained in Canada, but of course travelled to Europe. But it's about rule breaking in a way that sort of embraces tradition, but is sort of creative innovation. That just really gives you a sense of the different characters these wineries have, which makes touring the region such a treat.
Sounds incredible, and I'm
delicious.
Actually very surprised as well. It maybe doesn't have the international profile of even American wine regions or sort of lesser known sort of valleys in South Africa. It's interesting that we've yet to sort of really see it on menus in Europe.
It is like the Napa Valley up north of the border. It doesn't have the reputation, partly, even with myself, I was very snooty about them. Part of the reason is because they create small batch wines, vintages in a way, and most of these wines, they don't have enough to export. So that's good and bad. It's good because it is becoming now very, very desirable. And it does make it almost, you do have to make it a destination or drink them in Canada. But some of the larger wineries are, of course, award-winning, and they are going abroad. But I think what I enjoyed so much is that it was kind of a hidden discovery in that they're not all over the place, and you really could taste what's special about them, but you have to almost go there to enjoy them.
And Marcella, tell us what you've been up to.
I have an annual summer pop-up restaurant for you on the hillside above Bellevue Square in Zurich. It's a little bit hidden, but I'm sure you will find it. Soi Thai is set in the former Denzler rope factory, where ropes were once manufactured on a 100-meter-long production line. This is quite impressive, because now you can sit here on colorful plastic stools and tables covered with floral print plastic tablecloths, like in Bangkok. They serve, of course, delicious Thai street food with daily changing specials, and I can recommend larp, a tasty meat salad with roasted rice, coriander and mint. It's just heavenly. Or a classic like papaya salad. This is always on the card. And if you happen to be in Zurich, so hurry up, because Soi Thai is there only until mid of September.
And is the sort of long, sort of 100-metre long building still there? Because I went to a rope factory in Bridport in Britain, and it was so fascinating to see the kind of that shape of a room.
Yes, absolutely. This is still there. Of course, not that long anymore, because there is a kitchen and other rooms there. But you feel the production line, and you feel the historic building, which is, by the way, it's protected. And it's, even if you are coming just for drinks, it's very impressive. But it's a bit hidden. You have to look for it. But it's actually like 10 minutes walk from Bellevue. And Sophie, what have you come across that you'd like to share?
So I'm currently nurturing a bit of an addiction to indigo, and I've been dyeing my wardrobe and my children's wardrobe with a vat of Japanese indigo, naturally sourced, it's from an indigo plant, and it's sort of boiled down into this powder. So we've been dipping and tie-dyeing and just essentially just dyeing everything we can get our hands on. And then we're also reflecting on the history of garments and colour and fashion, because, indigo comes from India, and it was sort of adopted into quite a few cultures over millennia. But you can see that it's obviously very, very core to Japanese culture, and this idea of these beautiful blues, this Aizome indigo dye, which is really integrated into Japanese techniques, but also this idea that the denim, how did the jeans and that neon blur that came out of, actually the south of France and then was sort of exported around the world, became so much part of our culture. And I can kind of feel it now, because when you've got a big sort of vat of indigo, you can just see yourself dipping everything in there.
Oh, tell me about it. I've been filming a series for Chanel, and one whole episode was on denim. So we went to France, where they dye their yarns, and there's nothing just more hypnotic than seeing these big vats of indigo and looking at the cotton, the white, pure organic cotton that goes into the indigo and that transformation. And what is it about that blue of indigo? It's just so hypnotic.
And it's so fascinating that there was this incredible 17th century indigo production in Japan, which was quite key to their economy at one point. But then you saw the industrialization of dye and the chemicals came into play. It shifted everything so much. It shifted our perception of colour. The idea of blue became less sort of rarefied and exotic in a sense. So I think blue and our relationship with blue is really interesting. But I also love the effect that dyeing things and tie-dyeing things has on children, because it's such a magical experience for them. And so we've strung up, these huge washing lines in the garden. Everything is just turning into blue. Wherever I go, I can just spot them because they're all tie-dyed. My 3 little kids are just hopping about. And so I think it's actually quite a good way of keeping track of people in your family. But it might start looking a bit comical when we're all wearing the same indigo. But
well, this time next month, Sophie, I want you sitting opposite me, head to toe in indigo and tie-dye.
I will be, and I've got some really beautiful pieces of designers that I probably will not mention, that I've transformed their garments into a very beautiful blue with interesting Japanese techniques integrated, so they're basically unrecognisable. From Andy Warhol's tin of Campbell's soup to Flemish still lives of grapes and pomegranates, food is a subject that's often explored in art. Depending on the work, it can also be a conduit to discussions on heritage, on society or class. But in Swiss artist Sandra Knecht's pieces, it provides a way into both exploring and building community. She cooks dishes that are artworks in themselves.
Though she normally operates from a farm in the Swiss countryside, Knecht recently visited London for one of her food happenings, an occasion where she gathers strangers around a table to enjoy her art lunch and get to know each other in the process. Convex Deputy Editor Chiara Ramella went along.
Food and art have a long-standing, intimate relationship. How many creative ideas over the centuries have been hatched at a cafe table or at a restaurant banquette? Dinners, drinks and drawn-out soirees are fundamental to the way the art world operates, to encourage networking and extra interest in an artist's oeuvre, but it's not often that the meal itself is the artwork. Yet that's the case for Swiss artist Sandra Knecht. Born in Zurich, now based on a farm in the canton of Basel-Land, over the years her exploration of the concept of home has led her to employ many mediums, from photography to video, but her practice has often centred around cooking. It was at one of her food happenings at London Serpentine that I got to catch up with her and ask her where the idea to focus on food in her work first came about.
Bei mir ist es so, dass ich von Anfang an angefangen habe mit Kochen.
I'd been cooking from the very beginning. I cooked because I didn't have any money. They weren't beating a path to my door. I started in the art world at the age of 45. So it was the first thing that I could do in order to earn a living. And at some point I ended up turning it into art by taking the place where I was or the circumstances I was in and developing a flavor profile out of that.
Profile erarbeitet habe.
Titled The Dinner Party, the performance I attended consisted of an elaborate meal made up of 8 courses, each of which was not only inspired by, but meant to represent another artist who has been hugely influential on Knecht herself.
I lost my heart under the bridge.
So PJ Harvey becomes a lemon curd with butter crumble, while Zanele Muholi is vanilla ice cream on volcanic stone, and Frida Kahlo a little chicken taco with homemade mole. Sandra Knecht cooks the dishes herself, aided by a kitchen team, before explaining to the audience how and why they came about. It's a very synesthetic approach, so I'm keen to find out how the idea came to her and how she associates every artist with every dish.
ist gar nicht so einfach zu beantworten. Ich habe die Arbeit gesehen.
It's not an easy answer. I remember seeing or hearing about Judy Chicago's work, The Dinner Party, and also I took inspiration from Vanessa Bell's 50 famous women with those plates with their portraits on them. And with the Judy Chicago work, I always asked myself, well, what would that taste like if we could eat it? And that is how this came to be. I asked myself which artists, female artists, would be at my dinner party, the ones that influenced my world, and how do their works taste to me? And as a result of that, I developed these flavor profiles, and from there, the recipes.
Habe ich Rezepte gemacht.
Not all dishes are necessarily meant to be enjoyable. Nan Goldin is a spoonful of sugared water with bitters in it. But after all, these aren't just dishes, but edible artworks. Still, some courses are also objectively delicious, such as her homage to Johanna Lear, a surprising combination of borscht and apple pie. Knecht tells me more of how it came together.
Dieses Gericht Borscht mit Pirogen war oder ist einer.
The dish is borscht with pierogies, and that is dedicated to the writer Johanna Lear. She worked in search and rescue and often would eat this dish of borscht with apple pie at home. And so this is my way of trying to unite these two things. She worked in search and rescue at sea, so it's a boat at sea, and then trying to unite that with something that I associate with her and that expresses my love for her. So you have the pierogi, which is like the boat, and it's swimming in a sea of borscht.
In einem roten Meer von Borscht.
Crucially, the dishes are presented to a room full of dozens and dozens of people, all sat at communal long tables next to one another. Most of the attendees don't know each other here, and conversation is certainly encouraged by the peculiarity of the occasion and the food itself. Bringing people together through a meal is crucial for Knecht. Her art is all about creating and exploring the idea of community, and more widely, trying to understand what underpins our sense of home, regardless of where it physically is.
Der ist enorm wichtig. Gemeinschaft ist extrem wichtig für mich.
Community is extremely important to me, and that also includes community with animals. I'm very dependent, therefore, on farmers, on artisans. So that's one thing. And then I also am very interested in this idea of where home, and in German we use this word Heimat, which means both home and homeland. It goes a bit deeper. Where that comes from, where this idea of belonging and therefore also Heimat comes from. I think that without a community, we are nothing. And it is very necessary to have a community, but that community doesn't necessarily have to be made of humans. You just have to commune with the world and feel that empathy.
Verbindet und dass man empathisch bleibt.
Perhaps the small talk around dinner hasn't quite turned us into a community today, but we've certainly spent a lot of time mulling over the idea of how important other people are in shaping our own sense of self. An idea definitely worth chewing on. For Confect, I am Chiara Rimella.
Food, memory and identity all simmer gently in Mediterranea. The new cookbook from journalist and writer Anastasia Miari. In it, she takes us on a journey through the kitchens of grandmothers across the Mediterranean, from the hills of Crete to the coasts of Lebanon.
This is not just a cookbook, but a deeply personal and cultural homage to slow living, regional traditions, and time-honoured recipes passed down through generations. With stories as rich as the dishes themselves, Mediterranea captures the essence of what makes this region's food so beloved and so deeply rooted in place and people.
I caught up with Anastasia to talk about the women behind the recipes, the power of cooking as storytelling, and what we can all learn from the Mediterranean approach to life.
Mediterranea is inspired, of course, by my Greek grandmother, my yaya. And I think beyond the recipes and beyond the food, I think what really inspires me about Mediterranean cuisine is the lifestyle and the way that we eat. So it's not just a case of oh, we eat the Mediterranean diet and it's healthy for us. It's more that these grandmothers adopt a way of life that means that they live longer and happier and more fruitful lives. And I think that's kind of really what I wanted to capture with this book. Of course, there's lots of yummy recipes in there that are really healthy from the Mediterranean and from these ladies. But it's also, I hope, a tome to kind of live by. It's a tome of life lessons and anecdotes from these women that I think live really fruitful and wholesome lives. And it's all about, you know, coming together to eat, sharing, meze, tapas, also eating locally, eating organic, eating fresh, eating seasonally. You know, it's all the different ways that we eat in the Mediterranean. And I think that these women, the nonnas, the yayas, the abuelitas, they're kind of the OGs of this, you know, the Mediterranean eating trend.
It's really interesting, and I know the book's taken you all over the Med, and it's very photographically rich, as I just said. But there's a lot of humanity in each of the recipes. They're almost like biographies of these women. You get a glimpse inside their living rooms, and they're quite humble, a few of them, kitchens, pots and pans, and then a few sort of actually rather splendid palazzos in there as well. But you're really telling stories with each recipe. Who really stood out when you were making this book?
Oh God, there's so many for so many different reasons. So there's one lady, Nicoletta, who's in Palermo, and I basically befriended her when I was living in Sicily. And she's actually related to, I always get his name wrong, Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa, who wrote one of the sort of seminal Italian novels, The Leopard. And she basically is the most down-to-earth member of aristocracy that you might meet. And she runs cooking classes from her palazzo. So she basically kind of like took me under her wing and introduced me to Palermo and the food scene in Palermo. And she's so inspired by Sicilian cuisine, despite being from Venice and having been raised in Venice. And she lives in the most incredible palazzo, as you mentioned. So it's kind of awe-inspiring to go into a place and cook in a kitchen that's 500 years old, with so much history, with a woman that basically has dedicated her life to the history of that palazzo and to renovating it and restoring it. So that was very special. And she's also just great fun. She's a great person. There's also a lady called Alfia, who I cooked with, who's almost the opposite of that, who I met also in Sicily in a really humble port town called Riposto. And more because of her story, I was really moved because she spoke a lot about what she regretted in life. And it kind of made me think about not letting moments in life pass you by and not letting chances in life pass you by. And when she was younger, she didn't really have another choice but to marry the man that she married and live the very simple life that she lived, which was essentially get married very young, look after a brood of children and not do much else apart from be at home and cook and clean. And she said she always regretted marrying the wrong man because he didn't give her the love that she always felt that she deserved, and she suffered all of her life for that. And now he's gone, and she kind of broke down over this aubergine. I shouldn't laugh, but she sort of started crying over this aubergine melanzana telling me about this. And I think that's what is the most moving thing about this project, because I'm not a chef, I'm actually a journalist, and I think what I do best is getting into the nitty-gritty of, you know, people's lives and their beliefs and their persona. And I think it was really interesting speaking to her, and these stories come out again and again from these women, you know. It's either what they are really happy to have achieved by the time they're 80, 90 years old, or otherwise it's the regrets that they have about the life that they led, which I think has a lot to teach us about how to live our own lives.
And also that forum, that place in the kitchen when you're chopping onions, and it's a really open space for just discussion and recollections. Do you feel like some of the recipes are also, you know, a way of holding on to memories, a way of expressing a moment of culture, something that might be slipping through our fingers in a way that, you know, modern life and all the things that we that we have in terms of social media and speed and kind of modernity, some of these recipes are kind of really the opposite of that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, some of the recipes, for example, you're on the Manti page now, which is a Turkish friend of mine, Sanem's grandmother, who lives in Izmir. It's actually really difficult to keep up techniques if you don't practice them every day. I'm talking about cooking techniques now. So, creating a pasta or making a dumpling dough and rolling it and shaping it, if that muscle memory isn't with you and you're not practicing it, week after week throughout the years of your life, then actually it's really difficult to perfect that skill. And I think that's also another important part of what I do. It's almost sort of trying to connect with heritage and also create a repertoire, culinary repertoire, which means that we leave behind a legacy and we also hold on to the legacy of those that have gone before us. And I think it is being lost because there's such a culture now of new recipes. Most of the food writers and the cooks that you see on Instagram, it's all about new stuff, new ways of doing old things. And in that sense, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think trying a new recipe is really exciting, but I also think that it's important to hold on to our culinary legacy because it's almost this sort of like intangible bit of our culture that if we don't learn that from these women, it does get lost because they're not the generation to write things down.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I have wonderful memories of my grandmothers who are no longer with us. Just their kind of touch, their tactility, the way that they cooked pastry, for instance. It's really interesting. Those memories are with me, and it's and hopefully I'm using some of the same skills. But it really struck me when I was living in Istanbul, in fact, so many people relied on their grandmothers and mothers to cook for them, but they didn't know how to cook at all themselves. And they were almost still adults, actually fairly mature adults with families of their own, still relying on this older generation. And I think legacy is really important. The idea that this is the moment when we can have that sense of generational exchange and you're grabbing it and you're documenting it. But do you feel that there's something lost and at risk here in terms of just really making sure that the family traditions stay alive?
Look, we live very different lives to our grandmothers, right? We don't really live in the family home, ongoing. We kind of leave the home at 17, 18, we go and study. And then we kind of fly the nest. Whereas our grandmothers probably lived at home with their grandmothers until well into their 50s and 60s. So I think because of the way that we live, because we're kind of disconnected from our grandmothers, from our mothers, at quite a, I would say, relatively young age, we don't stay at home with our families anymore. It is difficult to hold on to these recipes and to keep up these skills. And I think that's why it's so important to document them while you can.
I finally just wanted to ask you, we talk about blue zones, we talk about this idea of longevity. How important do you think food is that? I mean, you touched on it earlier, but how important is food in all of that? And what would you say about the Mediterranean that you think is still so compelling in terms of just living that sense of beautifully kind of that sort of long and fruitful life?
I've got quite a contentious view on this, especially as a cookbook author. I don't think it's all about the food. I think it's about the way that we eat. I think it's about the way that we commune. I think it's also, I lived in London for 10 years and then I moved to Greece and I realised it's just a much slower pace of life. Of course, if you have less cortisol running through your body, you're going to live longer. It's great that we eat seasonal produce and it's all, very available to us and we're able to, even on quite a humble living, let's say, like my grandmother, she was no duchess. So she lives in a little whitewashed house in a village, but she's able to eat really well and grow her own veggies. So yes, the climate helps and the produce helps, but it also is amazing that my yaya can go and sit on her front stoop, doesn't have to call anyone up for a coffee or to go for a meeting. She'll just come across all of her mates every afternoon. They'll sit on the front stoop and they'll just sit and watch the world go by. It's that whole like dolce far niente concept, you know, that the beauty of doing not very much, that it just chills you out. And that also, you know, contributes to just being a lot happier and a lot more relaxed.
The writer Anastasia Miari there, and her book, Mediterranea, is published by Quadrille Publishing and is out now. Marcella, if you could bring just one ingredient or cooking philosophy from the Mediterranean to your everyday life, what would it be?
Well, I'm actually cooking already like that, but for me, the most important is like fresh ingredients from field or sea right to pan. Like, for example, I don't know if you know cima di rapa. I think it's called turnip greens in English. Cima di rapa is a wonderful green vegetable, and it's just briefly fried in a pan, or it's delicious within a pasta. This, or puntarelle, is another dish you can make from cima di rapa. I just love it. And or then take just a fresh fish, you put it on a pan, a bit of lemon, olive oil. This is enough for me. It's heavenly cuisine. So this book might be actually the perfect gift for me. Gillian, do you think we've lost something by not cooking in the same seasonal or slower way as people in the Med?
Well, absolutely, but I think it's been a big shift, and I think now most of the people I know have kind of veered away from big weekly supermarket shops, and they go to their local stores on their little high streets, or more and more places are popping up farmers markets, and I think people definitely are getting much more pleasure about pottering in a market and talking to the growers about where they grow their garlic and where they pick their aubergines. In fact, it was interesting that just before we started this show, talking to our producer, Carlotta, she has her own allotment garden, and I think people are much more interested in the process of growing and the ritual of growing and the pleasure of cooking with something you have grown. So I think it's definitely changed because so much was lost. Sophie, at the heart of this book is recipes from grandmothers. Do you have a recipe that was passed down from your grandmother with stories that sort of inspired you how to cook a dish?
I have really strong memories of making, like roast dinners with my grandmother, who was from the north of England. But I remember she had a mint roller. So you pick fresh mint and then you had to roll it with this special machine and then make the mint sauce for sort of like a lamb or something. And she made the most amazing pastry and the most amazing pies. But I think what's interesting about the book and also the grandmothers is there's so much incredible love that goes into each dish and emotion, the nurturing and the kind of sense that, in a way, of self-sacrifice some of these women. I think it's very touching the way Anastasia has managed to get the idea of people's hopes and dreams and maybe even life disappointments, and she's talking to them over the dishes. And I'm sure, if I really got my grandmother, who had dedicated her time, especially my Australian grandmother, into, real domesticity, and she was very peerless and very exacting. She made a great pavlova. I just wonder, and trifle, I wonder whether she would also reflect on some of the things she hadn't done and some of the complexities and ambivalence around cooking, which is in this book, as well as the joy. In 2023, Maison Kurkdjian, founded by the celebrated perfumer Francis Kurkdjian, took over a corner of Versailles to create the Perfumer's Garden, a sensory botanical experience in the gardens of the Trianon Chateau.
There, a team of gardeners spent 2 years reviving this once-neglected part of the estate. Today, it welcomes visitors curious to explore the natural ingredients used in perfumery and to learn about the rich history of the craft itself. The profession of perfumer, after all, traces its roots back to the court of Louis XIV.
On a recent morning, Confec's Julia Webster Ayuso joined Francis Kurkdjian and Giovanni Delu, the deputy head gardener, for a sensory tour of the gardens.
Versailles is a synonym and a symbol of opulence. And I believe that this little secret garden, in a way, is the opposite of opulence. To me, it's about simplicity. Even though it's very sophisticated, because as you can see, we have different parcels of different flowers and plants. It's very clean in its own way, in kind of a disheveled way. But it remains very simple. So we are right now. What I'm smelling, to answer your question now, what I'm smelling, I think they just cut the grass, because I smell something very leafy grass scent in the air. It's a bit early to get the smell of the flowers. We still have flowers. We are in early July. Most of the scented flowers are gone. I believe they may have some tuberose plants somewhere. We have also the greenhouse, as you can see here on the left. Yeah. It's a tiny greenhouse that was built in the 19th century. The main building is from Louis XV, which is basically mid-18th century. Mm-hmm. We just renovated it, the walls and the roof and the windows as well. And of course we replanted the entire garden. It was a dump, basically. It was what you feel is old in terms of shapes for the little gardens. 3 years ago it did not exist. It was uneven ground, totally upside down, totally abandoned. And for the past 3 years, the team of gardeners, it's an incredible team of gardeners, led by Fulvia and Giovanni from Italy. They fall in love with the project and the idea, and they are just making an extraordinary work. Those are artichoke flowers.
Artichoke flowers. Yes. We have a lot of lavender.
Lavender,
here.
Yes, it's lavender season.
Very fragrant.
Want to smell? You have rosemary here.
Oh, beautiful.
It's an organic garden.
Lots of bees as well.
Lots of bees as well, because there are some ruches nearby. That's kind of it's a lunch. Oh, it's breakfast.
It's breakfast for the bees.
It's breakfast for the bees. Look at that. It's like almost like an orgy. Like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And I'm also interested by your personal history with Versailles, because I know it goes back a long way.
I'm old now, so I can say a long way.
But you studied in Versailles. You studied perfumery.
I studied perfumery in Versailles in the early 90s, basically in 90, from 90 to 92, a mile away from the castle. I used to live in a very tiny student room. So it was about, I would say, 7 square meters.
Okay. So a classic Parisian experience.
Classic Parisian experience, exactly. And with a few friends, we used to spend our spare time in the garden of Versailles, no matter the season, because we had space. We could lay on the grass. We could just do the homework, smell, laugh. Life was a bit different, like 30 years ago, you know. No internet, no social media to lose your time. So it was more about getting together, being together in the castle of Versailles. At the same time, I was ending my career as a ballet dancer, so I used to perform in Versailles.
Yes, I've heard about this.
And it was quite fun, I have to say.
And there was a special performance.
I made many performances. One of them, 2 are still memorable. One, I was acting as Louis XIV on top of the horse carriage, the big one, with 6 white horses. I was on the very top, like maybe 15 meters high.
And this was
big, and all of a sudden the candles that were around the carriage, one of the candles fall in the carriage. We start to get fire on site with the horses carrying
oh my God.
me with my helmet and my feathers on the hat, and it was so much. We had so much. I have so many good memories.
That's an incredible memory of Versailles.
Yeah.
And this was when you were studying to be a dancer as well.
But this is at the end of. I was 22, 23, so basically it's the end of for me, end of practicing ballet. I never really practiced after that. And the beginning of my career as a perfumer. So that was my link. This is my link to Versailles. And then I came back in 2003, 2004, once to work on and to recreate the idea of a perfume that could have been worn by Marie Antoinette.
In this garden, if you were to bottle the spirit of Versailles today with this garden, what ingredients or notes would you choose?
Definitely green notes, that's for sure. Because we have lots of grass, and when you walk on it, as we do now, you smell the green, the cut grass, the green cut grass scent. What definitely I will add some rose scent, because we dedicated a big part of the parterre for roses. So the roses are important. I think I would add some lentisk. Lentisk is a plant that comes from the Mediterranean that we are able to grow here and smells like a little bit like a green pea, petit pois.
Yeah.
A little bit of mint, because we have a collection of mint. A little bit of basil, because we have a collection of different species of basil. There is one remaining. Look here. There is one remaining roses at the very end.
Oh, it's the very end.
It's so delicate.
Wow. That's so
Yeah,
beautiful.
and it's tiny one that's left. There is another one coming here. So roses definitely. This is sage, I believe. If let's make sure that we don't have bees, but yeah, this is sage.
Wow.
Sage is interesting because it's it's fresh, herbal, and yet a little bit animalic. There is something a bit dirty about sage.
Earthy.
Yeah, earthy, almost dirty.
And
this smells good.
There's something about French gardens that is very sort of formal and symmetrical.
Yes, very much so.
Very much, and the aesthetic here is not quite that.
It's in between. The aesthetic is between the French garden with that symmetry, as we discussed about, because symmetry is about Versailles at some point, but also Versailles is about that unexpectedness, something that you won't expect, and it's true that you won't expect such a little garden far away from what we all know about Versailles, which is the very, very, very symmetrical garden, very well taken care of. Here it's wilder. And on the other side of the wall, you see on the right, there is a wall.
Yeah.
So this is I call it the cherry garden, because there are lots of cherry trees. And it should be the season, so we might have, or even apricot, so we might get some.
So there's a little orchard on the other side.
There's a little orchard on the side, and further down, there is a garden that we call the secret garden.
And so what is the message you would like to transmit with the Jardin du Parfumeur? Because you talk about the importance of natural materials in perfume, obviously. We also have synthetic materials, but here it's all about...
It's all about nature. First of all, it's a tribute to Versailles in two ways. First, tribute to Versailles for me personally as a student at the perfumery school, a way to give back. It's also an educational garden, because even though it's open to the public, but under certain restrictions. So it's not openly open. You have to apply to visit it, because there are guided tours, and when you walk through it with the guides, they explain you the importance of. First of all, they tell you more about the flowers that we use in perfumes. They tell you about also the botanical aspect of it. They also teach you on which raw materials goes in which type of perfumes. This is so beautiful. You see, you have like a everlasting flower, the yellow and purple from everlasting and lavender, and all the bees. It's like a breakfast time. It's so funny.
Deputy head gardener Giovanni Delou was involved in the project from the very start.
and in collaboration with the team at Maison Francis Kurkdjian, carefully chose all the species cultivated in the Perfumer's garden.
We are in the Perfumer garden. I built this garden with my colleagues Fulvia Grandizio, and we built it in between the Grand and the small and the Petit Trianon. This garden is situated in an historical production zone that was used to produce flour for Grand Trianon. So we need to have a blooming garden that smell and that show all the most important plants for perfumery today and for the king. For example, we have a collection of oranges that was the favorite perfumes for Louis XIV. We have a lot of Rosa Centifolia that was one of the best perfumes for the Queen Marie Antoinette. And each line of this quarter, of this garden, it's composed with more plants in a biological plantation, more level to plant protect them each other, to use less water. We don't use chemical products, and so when we go around to discover the garden, we have smell, we can discover beautiful flowers, and we see a lot of insects that love our flower.
What is your favorite corner of this garden?
One of the favorite in this garden is here.
Right here.
Here we are in the Mediterranean area. I come from Italy, and so we have Helichrysum italicum, lavender, artichoke, iris, and so plants that remember a little bit for me the summer holidays near to the sea.
The Mediterranean
in this moment,
holidays.
Yes, in this moment I love this part.
And so if you had to choose one scent from these gardens to put in a bottle to create a scent, which one would it be? Would it be the rose?
Oh, I think that it's the rose. I discovered the perfume, the rose perfume even, and I love it. I think that it's a smell that it's happy, it's fine, delicate, but that you can use in each occasion, and I love it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful smell. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Confect Corner. My thanks, as ever, to Marcella Palik in Zurich and Gillian Tobias for joining me here in London. Confect Corner is produced and edited by Carlotta Rebello and Steph Chungu, with production assistance from Desiree Bandley in Zurich. Remember to pick up your copy of the new summer issue of Confect Magazine or subscribe by heading to confectmagazine.com. Until next time, from me, Sophie Grove, goodbye and thanks for listening.